I still maintain and I believe that Martin Campbell's idea for this movie was like the origin story of James Bond, even down to the point where like, you know, Bond gets Vesper a dress. He's like, I need you to look good.
I need you looking fabulous, so that when you walk up behind me and kiss me on the neck, the players across from me will be thinking about your neckline and not about their cards.
Bond is challenging Vesper to play a feminine role by essentially having her recreate that moment Solange walked in and kissed her husband, Mr. Demetrius.
And then she retorts back where he comes in, he's like, I have a dinner jacket.
I have a dinner jacket.
There are dinner jackets and dinner jackets. This is the latter. And I need you looking like a man who belongs at that table.
That whole moment of him putting on the iconic tuxedo, like that's all played up to a point where it feels like the filmmakers are purposely making this scene kind of feel like Batman putting on the bat suit for the first time. Like that's really what that scene felt like to me. So it just made sense throughout the movie that he's like, well, he's not James Bond yet. He's not 007 yet. He's not the one from the movies yet. This is his origin movie.
It's Batman Begins.
So he can't say the iconic line. We can't put the iconic music till the very end of the movie. And it fits with the story because everything that Charlie said about, you know, this is why he's this cold-hearted person. But as the movie goes on, I do feel like this movie feels empty and it's missing things.
Another just kind of like odd moment is when, you know, we're so used to, what do you have? Vodka martini, shaken not stirred. In this case, it was
Vodka martini.
Shaken or stirred.
Do I look like I give a damn?
That's an interesting way of keeping it fresh, like having Bond say something different. But in this, Bond is just playing cards, right? And he's like, send the bar guy over. The guy comes over, and out of nowhere,
just makes up a drink.
Bond makes up a drink.
Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily. Shake it over rice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
Yes, sir.
You know, I'll have one of those.
So will I. It's not that late. My friend, bring me one as well. Keep the fruit.
He just makes up this drink that sounds great, and that's another one of those things where as a kid I was like, wait, is he making up a vodka martini? No, it's not a vodka martini. It's something new, and he just does it, and it's like, why? Why does he do
Vesper, well, he makes the drink, but like the weirdest part about the shaken not stirred thing is like typically people don't order martinis shaken. Most of the time they're just stirred.
Because you get little chunks of ice, which is not good.
So it's just a weird thing where they're like, where he says shaken not stirred. That's specific to his character. So then when the guy asked him, it's like the writers are trying to be tongue in cheek about it, but at the same time, it's like that ruins the logic of how an actual martini is ordered. So it's a little
funny
weird.
When you were talking about how you see this movie, I was actually thinking about martinis in the way Bond ordered it. Like he orders it shaken, so there's little bits of ice and it's a little bit more diluted, and that's some of the aspects of this movie you don't like, or the length or the dilution, and there's just little pieces that shouldn't be there.
But it's also confusing because it's like he's ordering vodka martinis, but then he's also ordering this random drink called a Vesper, and why? What is the significance of the Vesper, and how did he come up with the ingredients?
What happens with Vesper Lind? Maybe he never has another Vesper, and that's when he gets into his typical Bond drink. But I mean, maybe you're in a way saying like the audience would have benefited from, rather than him becoming and saying James Bond at the end, like somehow if the pre-title sequence took care of that in that like first 10 minutes or something, and then from the title sequence on, he is the Bond that people know.
I will say this about the prologue. It is shot much differently than the rest of the film on a whole.
It's supposed to look like a classic spy drama. Like it's sending a message of like, we're starting anew.
It's shot in black and white in 16 mil because you can tell it's super grainy. Specifically, the bathroom fight is shot super grainy.
Yeah, it is.
And like slightly, probably a little overexposed as well. All of the angles and shots leading up to him talking to him is like shot with these really cool Dutch angles. So all the shots are like slightly off kilter. It has a very film noir look to it. And then the bathroom stuff feels separate from it because then it's like, oh, well, now it's all tied into the gun barrel thing. It just feels like such a weird part because it's like there's that part of the movie and then the rest of the movie it's not that at all.
Had the whole movie been like that, it really would have been like a classic 1950s, 60s spy drama. It's almost like the idea was, let's take Bond's whole backstory and just compress it into the prologue. And then from there, we can do whatever we want. But in the prologue, we're going to do a black and white. Like, we're going to make it feel like it's the 1960s. We're going to have a throwback to Ian Fleming's 1960s. And then they...
To me, it's not a negative to the
it.
film, but it is interesting to see that they were like, let's try something a little new and just do a different style for the beginning of the movie. And then the rest of the movie isn't that way. Not to say that other movies didn't have some kind of style or flair to the way they shot or edited them. Because obviously we talked about that a lot in Die Another Day, had a lot of these crazy ramping motion, like swishing things. If we don't want to elongate this too much, like I'll concede and say, yeah, I think it's under GoldenEye, but From Russia with Love is pretty great on its own. And I think I could see where Charlie would be like, well, if From Russia with Love was here, I could see it putting down below this. Goldfinger, I know, kind of has some issues in the plot towards the end of it, but I still think it's a much more fun and engaging movie. I agree with you, Charlie. I think GoldenEye is still the better movie.
I mean, that's where I'm gonna stick to. And again, doesn't mean that Casino is a bad movie. Casino rocks, but Casino lives on one end of a spectrum. Other movies in the top 10 live on another end of the spectrum. And then GoldenEye.
So you're saying we should
is
have
the
two
perfect
separate lists?
No.
No, that's not what he's saying.
No,
He's
no,
just
no, no,
saying,
no.
Where Casino's the top of one and GoldenEye is the top of another.
Yes, people can conceive of a universe where there are those separate lists, and one is like the dark movies and the other are the goofy movies. But that only accentuates my point, which is that GoldenEye is both of those lists combined. Because GoldenEye, there are moments of humor in this movie, right? There are moments of humor.
Not many.
And how the hell did you find out where I lived?
Same way I found out your name. I thought M was a randomly assigned letter. I had no idea it stood for...
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
But even like, don't touch that.
Don't touch that! It's my lunch.
Stuff like that is where GoldenEye manages to ride this balance beam of fun and sometimes goofy and then very serious. It manages that balance so perfectly that I got to give it those props as a movie versus an adaptation of a book. Because what is the best James Bond book adaptation? Casino Royale, hands down, best adaptation. But how does that go up against a movie that is the collective of tropes that happened over decades of filmmaking of Bond movies? It's GoldenEye. When it comes to these movies, this is the epitome of the collective, right? Now, if we were ranking action movies, Casino Royale, up against Die Hard and up against Bourne Identity movies and all that, Casino Royale would be intermixed with those, and then GoldenEye would be further down the list. But when it comes to ranking Bond movies, and again, this goes back to our initial episode 3 of From Russia with Love versus Goldfinger, there's a difference between a good movie, be it action or otherwise, and a good Bond movie. And you just can't take it away from GoldenEye. If you're a kid, you might be like, well, where's all the fun stuff? Where's Q? Again, this is why it's like, okay, if you love goofy Bond, you live with Spy Who Loved Me. If you love serious Bond, you're with Casino Royale. If you want the most balanced Bond that's ever been, you're with GoldenEye. Yeah. And that's why it tops my list. And that's without going into the specifics of GoldenEye. Because when you go into the specifics, it's like, oh man, all the bad guys are great. Like Boris Grishenko is great, and Xenia Zergevna Onatop is great, and Alec Trevelyan being like a Dark Link version of Bond. All these elements are so much fun and awesome. And you got your beginning of the movie, you got the GoldenEye layer. At the end, you have the GoldenEye layer. You have that mirror effect. You have all these. I hesitate to go into it because I got to go off the long list again. But it's
you don't need to go off the long list.
Well,
but
a lot of that stuff is silly.
Though.
Does Bond need to be silly?
Not silly. I don't think GoldenEye never. But that's the whole point. The whole appeal of GoldenEye is that it manages to be all those things without being silly. Yes, a volcano layer is silly, But specifically, GoldenEye manages to have all of these elements that typically were silly, but our Lord and Savior, Martin Campbell, manages to do all of that and not ever fall off the balance beam into crazy land. That's why I always say GoldenEye is such a well-balanced movie. It's the epitome of the Bond movies, goofy and serious combined into one. But if you just want dark, stark, and depressing, if you just want Batman Begins, go watch Casino. But that's
I think I do.
a specific taste.
It's just not a great mix. You've got a really compelling story.
Bond becoming Bond. You got some great parkour. You got a great airport scene. You got great card playing scene.
Bond movie at the beginning of his career and Bond movie at the end of his career. And that's what makes the decision somewhat difficult. But for me, it's simplified by the idea that GoldenEye is perfectly well balanced of all Bonds.
Casino Royale and License to Kill are over here.
Diamonds Are Forever and The Spy Who Loved Me are over here.
And GoldenEye is right here, the perfect balance of all things. GoldenEye never reaches a point of oversaturated goofiness. It is perfectly balanced.
I rewatched GoldenEye a good 2-3 times in preparation for this, thinking it was going to be a big battle for 1 and 2. And I found myself getting pretty bored with GoldenEye, and Casino was pretty fresh for me throughout my multiple rewatches of
But
it.
would you say though, Nance, would you say that's because GoldenEye is a boring movie, or would you say because your specific tastes are more geared towards that side of the spectrum, which is License to Kill and Casino, the darkness?
I would
like
say
the darkness.
It's probably my mind's more geared towards that.
I think I remember more out of GoldenEye overall than I do when I think about this movie. Because this movie, I think about, there's a poker scene. It takes up a chunk of the movie. I do remember the parkour scene, and that's about it. I don't think about the rest of the movie after that. I'm like, oh yeah, there's that plane thing. I completely forgot the Aston Martin DB5 was even in this movie. I watched this movie, I'm like, oh, that's in this movie. I completely forgot about that. This movie's somewhat forgettable in times, and I feel like it is a little more slow paced than it needs to be for a Bond movie like Charlie keeps harping on. And that's probably why I just don't see it as the top tier.
I think it's a damn good one.
It's a good movie. It's not a good Bond movie. I think really what it comes down to for me is this movie is the best vodka that money can buy. And GoldenEye is a complete vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about Casino Royale. Or as Felix says in this movie, I'll have everything hold the fruit. This movie is hold the fruit. This movie is hold everything that makes Bond fun is gone.